But in terms of a fanatical experience and something you look at, I don't think you could compare Liverpool versus Man City to Rangers versus Celtic. Welcome to this week's edition of One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Now don't forget to keep liking and subscribing, and equally importantly to leave your questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this week's show. The comparison of a game in the Premier League with a game in Spain. Obviously I've lived in Spain for 20 years. I saw the furore, the fascination, the scale of the game. A lot of it driven by social differences between Catalonia and mainland Spain, as well as obviously the competitivity of the two biggest teams in Spain, and Real Madrid and Barcelona. I don't like the comparison. I don't think we need to have the comparison. I don't think there's the same size of stadiums, because clearly there isn't. You've got 90-odd thousand in the new camp and something similar in the Bernabeu Stadium. You've got this unfettered rivalry that's slightly different to the rivalry from Liverpool and Man City. Liverpool and Man City are not natural rivals. They might be geographically situated, but they're not natural rivals in terms of performance. They're now natural rivals because of performance and not because of a whole variety of other facets. I don't think you have the same fanaticism that you have in the Spanish games as you do in the English game, but as the quality of football is concerned, if we're talking about it as a quality of football spectacle, I think you're looking at better football coming from Manchester City and Liverpool than you've seen probably over the last certainly 10 years between Barcelona and Madrid. So I don't ever like to lift another country's game and say, let's compare and contrast for that purpose. So I think Liverpool and Manchester City exists in its own right because of the brand of football. But in terms of a fanatical experience and something you look at, I don't think you could compare Liverpool versus Man City to Rangers versus Celtic in terms of intensity and belief behind the fabric of what these two football clubs represent. This is just two winning teams in a moment where their excellence supersedes other aspects of football and makes it a game, rather than a game based upon geography of Catalonia and mainland Spain and the sectarianism and beliefs of the Glasgow Giants. So no, I think it's a brilliant game, but it doesn't operate in those spaces. Eddie Howe's reward cannot be for keeping Newcastle in the division. Of course, he was given a helping hand with £93 million of a spend in January. Eddie Howe's reward surely can't be that someone gets to step in his shoes without having had a fair crack at dissuading people like me that he's going to take Newcastle to the next level, that he's going to take Newcastle to where we allude to or allege that they're going to get to because they're going to spend a lot of money. Now that's contradicted by some of the noises coming out of Newcastle about the fact they're only going to spend 60 million in the transfer market in the summer of the next season. Now, that's if you're trying to manage people's expectations, or if you're trying to suppress the idea that every agent can get all excited and run off to the bank and check their ATMs because Newcastle are in town, then that's the way to do it. If you're trying to build Newcastle into the false that we are led to believe they're going to be because of this enormous nation-state money, and I do mean nation-state money, then they're going to have to spend more. So I don't make the case. I don't think Eddie Howe will be the beneficiary of the ultimate unleashing of Newcastle's potential if the ownership model is what we believe it to be. I think he'll be the stepping stone. He'll be the Mark Hughes for the Roberto Mancini and up and onward for Man City. I think he'll get them to a certain position and his stock will go up, his credibility will go up, and he'll have managed Newcastle for a difficult period. But I don't think he'll be taken out in the summer. So I don't think the argument about Mourinho or anybody else is an argument that Newcastle will care to run. They're going through a stage of evolvements and they're going to acquire players, they're going to acquire a position in the Premier League through a series of huge financial investments, I suspect, and decisions. And the first decision shouldn't be Eddie Howe keeps them in the division and gets fired. Not that I have any sympathy for managers getting fired because they get paid, but in this instance, I'm not sure that it would be really relative to the progress of Newcastle to take him out now or in the summer after the end of this season. I find it very difficult to find anything other than a degree of disdain for Paul Pogba because he makes his choices. It's unarguable that he is a world, if you're talking about talent, if we can use an analogy about league levels, if you're talking about talent, pure talent, he's a Premier League winner in talent. If you're talking about application, discipline, focus and sustainable performances, he's a League 2 player. in terms of what's required of him to be able to match what's needed to match his ability. His ability's there, we know it, we see it for France. But his return for Manchester United has been poor. He and players like him are the reasons why are part of the reasons why Manchester United find themselves in the malaise that they're currently in. That, alongside poor decisions for the football operation side, the boardroom, second class support behind the structures that doesn't match the Man Cities and Liverpools of the world that got the best in class. But to go to your point, Paul Pogba is the architect of his own downfall. Paul Pogba, in whatever that downfall is, if his downfall is driving to check his bank balance every week and seeing himself getting paid £10 million a year, but turning out very poor performances. If you look at him on Saturday against Everton, it may well be that the surroundings he's playing in aren't great, but that means that his opportunity, the bar is set lower, so his opportunity to shine has been ever higher, and he hasn't done it. I think he's been an absolute waste of money. I think he's wasted his time, the club's time, and I think one of the best things that Manchester United can do is move him along with a raft of other Man United players that don't understand, really, and haven't been made to understand that it's their privilege to play for Man United, not Man United's privilege to have them. Look, it's very easy to sit from the outside and tell you what Everton have done wrong and tell you why it could be a case study for what people shouldn't do when they own a football club. You can't argue that what someone should do if they want a football club to be successful is put their money where their mouth is, right? And you can't argue Moshiri's put his money where his mouth is. The challenge is, with football, like all things, you have to learn lessons. Whatever business you're in and whatever business you come into, there will be a period of time when you first arrive in that industry where you're being led by the nose. Other people that know the industry or purport to know it will give you opinions that you might follow because you're looking around you thinking, I need to be sure in what I'm doing, or equally as prevalently, you've come into an industry thinking you know better than everybody else because you've been successful in another industry and you've not learnt your particular trade. So it gives you a time where you make these mistakes. And then what you do is, the definition of insanity is to keep repeating the same things to get the same outcomes. So keep employing bad managers, keep overpaying for players, keep not patronising your youth development, keep not making sure that the right personnel are behind the scenes, and what you'll get is Everton. So you have to look at that and say, as much as I don't want it to be an example of, because I owned a football club for 10 years, I ended up losing it. Mine was slightly different because I ran out of money during a banking crisis. But notwithstanding that, it gives me a vantage point to be able to see what's right and wrong. And what's wrong with this is consistent, flawed decision making. From the outset, you've got managers that have been put into place that don't fit the dynamic of the club. You've pursued managers that weren't capable and hadn't given you enough track record that they were going to give anything to you that was vaguely meaningful. And then you take managers that will alienate the club in terms of people like Rafa Benitez, and you make all these decisions alongside spending inordinate amounts of money on players that you've overpaid for. So I suppose if you want to summarise that and close your eyes about what a disaster looks like, well, a disaster looks like getting relegated from the Premier League. If you get through this with the skin of your teeth, by the love of God, you've got to look at your football club and say, okay, what have I got? How have I got myself in a position where I've spent £500 million to get a playing squad that people are saying is really poor in every aspect, from directors of football to managerial appointments? What are the lessons I've learned, and what do I deploy going forward? A question about getting rid of the loan scheme, I don't really see why that makes any sense. I mean, obviously the argument will be Premier League clubs have full and capable of being able to buy players with the abundance of wealth that they have from coming into the Premier League, and perhaps the question is loaded towards, I don't have an aversion to Premier League clubs being loaned down to the Championship and League One and League Two. If you're a Premier League player and you're not able to get in, say, a top Premier League club side because there's a few people in front of you, what's the advantage of dropping down to a league beneath you as the player? Does it enhance your career? If you look at Conor Gallagher as a classic case in point, why would you want to rule out a loan system that enables Conor Gallagher to go and continue to ply his trade in the Premier League, to become more fit for purpose against better players? We can all improve to some extent against players that are lesser than you. So if you drop down from the Premier League because you're just margins away, like Conor Gallagher obviously is at Chelsea, margins away from getting in their side as a case in point, you're dropping down into the Championship. He doesn't get any better. The players around him get better, but he doesn't get any better, because the only way you get better in life, whether it's in business or sport, is by competing with people that are better than you, or at least as good as you. So by Conor Gallagher as the case in point that I keep using, going into the Championship or League One. No benefit to him, no benefit to the parent club. Like Conor Gallagher playing in the Premier League, benefit for all. And of course then, if you look at the commercial situation, if we want to try to find a way to arrest the cost implications of football, to reduce transfer fees, to try and get hold of wages, to try and get hold of the economics of football, to try and build youth development so players can come through and see pathways, then the loan system in all its facets has to be in place. And it's a silly sort of one-dimensional argument to say, no, only for Premier League clubs to lend them to lesser clubs outside of the Premier League. It has to be able to be loaned for all purposes to make sure that the ecosystem works well for everybody. And the economics of the football world will benefit from loans and a more mature attitude towards clubs being able to, or being prepared to share players amongst one another. So no, I absolutely don't think it's right that Premier League clubs should be excluded from the loan system between one another. Okay, that's it for this week's episode. Now don't forget to leave me your thoughts on Pogba, Newcastle and Everton. Of course, like and subscribe, and most importantly, leave your questions in the comment section below and keep subscribing so we can get our 1 million subscribers. Look forward to seeing you next week.